Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more extra credits, continuing on with the extra history series revolving around Ned Kelly. This time, episode 2 Under Suspicion. Before we dive in, though, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Okay. Hopefully, this episode's more interesting than the first part, because episode 1 was kind of boring to me. Let's go ahead and dive right in.
Returning from his brief time as a bushranger, Ned found his family in an even worse spot than before. The farm was still failing, his siblings had dropped out of school, his mother's new fiancé had abandoned her after getting her pregnant, and his maternal grandfather, the only member of the family who had ever done well in Australia, died, leaving the family defenseless against a rich neighbor who was trying to get them thrown off their land. After another year of struggling to make ends meet, Ned reached out to the only man he knew who seemed to be doing well, Harry Power. He left home and turned bushranger again. Harry Power had gotten a lot better.
Bushranger exam. Name Harry Power. B+. Question. How much money should you steal if you steal money? All.
Better at this bushranging thing now that he had more experience. He and Ned became a terror across the countryside, adding so many crimes to their ledger that police began to wonder if there could really only be two of them. In desperation, the police put a 500-pound bounty for the capture of Harry Power. A man could do honest work for 10 years and not bring home that much. And that temptation tipped Ned's Uncle Jack over the edge. He had been a friend to Power when they were in prison together. In fact, he'd been the one who had told Power about this area in the first place. But now Jack secretly approached the police as an informant, and they began laying a trap. It was pure good luck that Ned fell into their hands even before the trap could be sprung. Feeling sick and tired, and especially sick and tired of Harry Power bossing him around, Ned retreated home to be with his family for a while. But he'd barely settled down in his own bed when the police kicked the door open and dragged him to prison. Good old Uncle Jack might have been a traitor to his friend, but not to his family. He insisted that the police let the boy go, or he would not bring them Harry Power. And they agreed. Evidence and witnesses
You know what? Respect.
against Ned mysteriously disappeared, and they even treated him to the unique luxury of a hotel room to keep him out of the way while they went to catch Harry Power. Ned didn't understand why he'd been treated to such magnificence, until they threw Harry Power in prison. Suddenly, the generous treatment he'd received from the police became a curse. Everybody, including Power, believed that Ned had turned traitor to protect himself. And while he might have gotten off the hook this time, Ned was still a criminal, and the local constable was determined to catch him at something. On April 20th, 1871, the constable would get his chance. A family friend had stopped by the Kelly farm, borrowing one of their horses and leaving his own for Ned to look after. She was a real beauty, a glowing chestnut mare who moved so smoothly you could fall asleep right on her back. Ned absolutely doted on her. He'd learned to ride on his mother's lap and loved horses more than life itself, but he rarely got to touch a horse like this one. He groomed her till she shone like gold and rode her into town to keep her exercised and fit, and yeah, to show off a little bit. But when the constable sees him parading through town on a beautiful horse, he thinks that is too fine a beast for the likes of Ned Kelly. He calls the boy aside, but the second Ned steps down, the officer leaps at him and shouts, "You are my prisoner for horse stealing." The horse spooks, and the constable misses his jump. Ned's first thought is for the horse. He's got to catch her before she runs loose and harms herself. So he runs after her. But the constable thinks he's trying to run away. He pulls out a gun and orders Ned to stop and face him. Ned obeys, only to find a gun already pointed at his head. Now, he hasn't done anything but borrow a horse from a family friend. What is this officer doing, threatening to kill him over it? "Shoot me and be damned," he yells. The officer shoots. A puff of smoke. The gun fails to fire. Panicked, the constable pulls the trigger again. Click. He steps forward for a better shot. Click. He starts shaking with fear, and before he can fire a fourth time, Ned grabs the gun and tries to wrestle it free. The constable won't let go, so Ned trips him and pins him to the ground. Now, Ned knows better than to hit a cop, but he can't take his chances on another shot being fired at him. Bystanders come rushing to help, pulling Ned off the man. The officer takes his gun back and slams it into Ned's forehead 5 times. It opens a gash so bloody that his superiors would later warn him to stop recklessly causing medical expenditure the next time he breaks the head of an Irishman. And of course, it turns out the horse was stolen, just not by Ned. His family friend had failed to mention that tiny little detail, and Ned had had no idea. Of course, neither had the police officer when he'd fired his revolver at Ned, or when he'd pistol whipped him, or when he had locked him in a prison cell. But by the time Ned appeared at his trial, a police report about the stolen horse had magically appeared. The fact that it was dated 5 days after Ned Kelly's arrest didn't stop the officer from citing this report as the reason he had come after the boy. This time, the judge sent Ned away for 3 years hard labor.
Bullshit.
When the actual horse thief was caught a few weeks later, he only got half the sentence. It seemed that being a Kelly and a former friend of Harry Power were crimes not listed on the books. Despite it all, Ned emerged from his second jail sentence determined to turn things around.
Oh, he's got a
but
thick
he
beard
was
now.
immediately tested. He came home to discover that his 14-year-old brother had been caught stealing 5 cows and had been given 5 years in prison, the harshest sentence ever given to somebody that young. Another cop had begun tracking his family's every move and had gotten so close to them in the process that he'd started an affair with Ned's sister. When she'd gotten pregnant, he'd left, taking half the family's horses with him. The sister and her baby had died. After hearing this news, Ned grit his teeth, collected his things, and set off to find honest work. His past haunted him. Many employers shied away from hiring an ex-convict, and where he could find work, his coworkers either feared him or tried to start fights with him to prove how much tougher they were than this one-time bushranger. Ned kept a level head. He built a new reputation as a quiet, honest man, one who would help stop a bar fight, and who always kept his word. Even his worst detractors had to admit that no man could work harder or better than he. But even 3 years in, police suspicion continued to dog Ned and his family. He lost track of how many times he'd woken up in the middle of the night with a police officer banging on their door, accusing Ned of stealing some local cow or horse that had gone missing. All Ned's life, he and his family had struggled to make ends meet on their broken-down, pathetic farm. All the good land had been snapped up by the wealthy squatters, men who had built huge private ranches on government land and refused to give it back. The government decided to let them keep it, but with one condition. They had to give back small portions so that poor families like the Kellys could rent it. But the wealthy squatters fought this tooth and nail. They made sure that only the worst farmland came available for selection by the poor families. And of that limited supply, the squatters then reclaimed 2/3 of it by hiring agents who pretended to rent it, only to give it right back once the government stopped looking. And when legitimate selectors, non-rich farmers like the Kelly family, managed to squeeze through all of those obstacles, the squatters did everything they could to drive them to bankruptcy. They impounded their animals, they cut off their water access, they paid police to investigate and even arrest them. This was why police had come to the house to investigate and then arrest Ned's father all those years ago for stealing a cow from a wealthy neighbor, because the police had been paid by that neighbor to do so. Ned's family had moved away from that squatter only to come into range of another one who complained about them so often that he convinced his buddy, the police commissioner, to build a new police station nearby just to keep an eye on them. And he scored a victory when the local constable caught Ned riding a stolen horse. Another squatter had spent the last decade harassing Ned's mother to sell him their farm, and now yet another pair of wealthy squatters set their sights on Ned. They accused him of stealing one of their bulls. When Ned asked them why they had done that, they told him, "Oh, we made a mistake. Turns out that bull had just wandered off. It's back now, though. What a rascal. Bulls, right? Anyway. Annoying, but okay, matter resolved, right? Ned's proved innocent. Everybody can go on their way." Well, no. A few weeks later, the squatters accused Ned of stealing an entire herd of calves. This was the last straw. Ned had so long struggled to make ends meet in a world stacked against him. He had served his time, and then done his best to live an honest life and put the sins of his past behind him. But now, Ned decided that if all these squatters so desperately wanted to make him a criminal, he would become one. And become one he did. Ned masterminded the creation of the biggest horse and cattle thieving ring in Australia. His scheme was brilliantly simple. Once he and his friends had stolen the horses, they would bring them to some remote ranch far from the scene of the crime. Then one of his friends would just happen to pass through dressed as a rich dandy who also just happened to be interested in buying livestock. The unwitting ranch owner, happy to help such courteous young men, would agree to act as witness, and bam, just like that, suddenly Ned's gang had a legal bill of sale for illegally obtained livestock, and they could turn around and sell those livestock to a real buyer who would never suspect a thing. For Ned, this was no longer a question of feeding his family. This was a matter of revenge, of taking a chunk out of the greedy squatters whose exclusionary land practices and extortionist control of the police had made it impossible for families like his to succeed in the first place. Join us next time as police desperation to catch Ned Kelly reaches fever pitch, and he sets off the chain of events that will make him the most feared man in the country.
Alright, and that was Extra Credits' episode 2 in their Extra History series on Ned Kelly, Under Suspicion. This was an okay episode. It was better than episode 1. I think I can confidently say that. Still not great in terms of what I expect from Extra Credits, but it was still okay. It was still enjoyable to watch. As are pretty much all Extra Credits videos. But yeah. Hopefully the trend continues though in this series, where episode 3 will be better than episode 2 here. But aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.